So now we looked in quite a lot of detail about the two parts of the tripartite of Stoic theory, which is physics and logic. What I'm going to do in this lesson is we're going to dedicate the whole thing to Stoic ethics, how to be mindful, living a good life, living a life worth living. And this is really what the Stoics aim towards, okay? The study of physics and the study of logic all culminated together to try and complement the Stoic ethics. Specifically in this lesson, we're just going to take an introduction. We're going to look at the ethics of the early Stoics. We're going to have a look at the cardinal virtues that one should have in order to live a life worth living. And we're going to look at Stoic philanthropy and Stoic mindfulness, okay, which are two of the three disciplines of Stoicism. So, taking the introduction, now that we've examined the first two areas of the tripartite understanding of reality, what we're going to do now is look at the final piece of the puzzle, which is the understanding of ethics. So Stoic ethics is not just one which is theoretical, but it's actually practical. Okay, so whereas logic and physics were more theoretical in their pursuits, Stoic ethics is a very practical philosophy. The later Stoics believed that ethics was more of a guide to how you live your life, and that this allows Stoicism to be more practical. But when we look at the early Stoics, despite Stoic ethics ultimately being more of a practical guide in general, the early Stoics did believe that it was still relatively theoretical in nature. So the early Stoics believed that in a very interesting ethical motto, which was just that to follow nature, and this referred to as living according to both the natural world and also living according to human nature. And this relates to the idea of living by nature and following human nature was the Stoic concept of oikiosis, okay? And this is often translated as affinity. So we're going to try and look at this Stoic understanding of affinity. The Stoics believed that human beings had natural moral instincts. So we talked in a few videos that the Stoics are actually a very naturalistic empiricist group, a bunch of people, and that this also sort of seeps into their ethics. So the Stoics believed that human beings were, they got their morality from nature. It was a natural thing that people naturally are morally have morals, and they have moral instincts. And there's actually some evidence for this proposition. Okay, we naturally behave in a fashion as to advance our interests and our goals. That's a natural understanding. We naturally identify with other people's interests. And the Stoics believe that these are sort of natural tendencies that linked us with the four Stoic cardinal virtues. That should say virtues, but it says values for some reason. So the four Stoic cardinal virtues. And these virtues were temperance, courage, justice, and practical wisdom. These are the four things that people must have in order to live a good life. Okay, in order to be truly the Stoic thinker, a Stoic ethicist almost. Temperance and courage were required to pursue our goals. Justice is a natural extension of our concern for an ever increased circle of people. Okay. That's a quote taken directly from a primary source that I'm going to link in the further reading section. That's why there's a little one there. And finally, practical wisdom is what best allows us to deal with what happens in life. Okay, so how are these cardinal virtues related to each other? Well, it has to first be said that the Stoics believed that more than just four cardinal virtues are mentioned in the last slide. They also believed in sub-virtues. So we have the four main cardinal virtues, but of each of the four, they were also split up into other different types of virtues. So they were almost subcategories. So for example, when it comes to practical wisdom, there are a number of virtues within that, and these include things like good judgment and discretion, etc. These are things that together make up this practical wisdom. Temperance is broken down into the virtues such as honour and self-control. So these cardinal virtues are fundamentally, they're actually fundamentally a Socratic theory. You can find their origin of the cardinal virtues from Plato's Republic. But obviously they've been taken and developed further by the Stoics. So an interesting view is from the philosopher Pierre Hadot, who suggests that there are actually links between the 4 virtues and the 3 what he called topi, which were the 3 Stoic disciplines. So these are things that these are new introduced to us here. So these disciplines are desire, action, and assent. These are the 3 things that, when we have the 4 cardinal virtues, allow us to achieve these 3 disciplines. Desire is argued to have derived from the study of physics, which is why we study physics through Stoicism. And when it comes to the second discipline, we sometimes refer to it as philanthropy. Okay, so Stoic philanthropy is the basic idea that human beings ought to develop their natural concern for others. So we should be doing this in relation to one of the cardinal virtues, which is justice. And this also ties quite a lot into their ethics, that once we have a cardinal virtue of justice, this allows us to have the discipline of being concerned for others, naturally concerned for others. It should be a natural thing that comes from our natural instincts. The best way to represent this is from a quote by Marcus Aurelius, and this is that men exist for the sake of one another, and this is from his Meditations. So it's a very nice quote, and it's a very kind quote as well, and it generally summarizes this idea of Stoic philanthropy. And it's a quote that is fundamentally an explanation of Stoic philanthropy. When it comes to Stoic mindfulness, which is actually the 3rd discipline, it's sometimes called assent, sometimes called Stoic mindfulness. It's really the Stoic treatment of emotions and one's psychology. And it's the discipline regards the necessity to make decisions about what to accept or reject in our experience of the world and how we deal with our emotions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to make an entire separate course on the Stoicism of emotions and how Stoics really dealt with emotions and mindfulness, because it's a philosophy on its own. But just for now, this is what the 3rd discipline of Stoic ethics was. So in summary then, fundamentally, Stoic ethics is concerned with virtue. Virtue theory was very popular in this period, so you have the Aristotelian virtue ethics as well as this in Stoicism. There are 4 cardinal virtues, which we've talked about. Each of the 4 cardinal virtues are made up of so-called sub-virtues. Okay, so for example, things like wisdom, practical wisdom, had sub-virtues such as good judgment and discretion. Stoic virtues are also connected with the Stoic disciplines, and those Stoic disciplines were action, desire, and assent. Action, philanthropy, and mindfulness, as well as what we talked about here. And in the next lesson, that isn't actually what the next lesson is going to be, but in the next lesson we're going to look at the contemporary view of Stoicism. I'm not sure why it says that. We're going to look at what the contemporary, how we can deal with Stoicism in modern society.